For years, Sister Wives viewers witnessed the cracks appear in the Brown family's formerly idyllic reputation. Kody Brown, once self-styled patriarch of a new polygamous dynasty, stood at the helm, his wives orbiting him, quietly contending with heartbreak, betrayal, and a glaring disparity in love and loyalty. But no one, not a single person, anticipated this. What if we were to tell you that the most reserved and logical Brown family wife, the woman who avoided the drama, who was alone, who stuck by Kody through thick and thin, would be the one to undo it all in a courtroom, under cameras, lawyers, and a shocked legal system? What if we let you in on a secret? Janelle Brown, looming in Robin's shadow, ignored by Kody and overlooked by fans, would be the face of justice, strength, and accountability. Because that's precisely what occurred. In a court fight nobody saw coming, but everybody rooted for. Janelle sued Kody Brown for years of financial manipulation, lying property transactions, and emotional manipulation. The verdict? A $415,000 court-ordered payment that not only left Kody speechless, it destroyed the very foundation he constructed his persona on. But how did it come to this? It all starts long before the court dates. It's about years of spiritual marriages without legal recourse, murky ownership contracts, and one man calling the shots, while the women, particularly Janelle, were left to sort out the emotional and financial mess. Let's go back. Janelle married into the Brown family as Kody's second wife, tough, rational, and intensely self-reliant. She contributed an element of stability to the family that Kody frequently gave credit for, but never really rewarded. With the passage of the years and the addition of the newer wives, it became increasingly evident Robin was Kody's favorite, emotionally, physically, and financially. Fans could sense the change. While Janelle kept working, taking care of her children, and investing in the family land ventures, Kody spent time, effort, and money on Robin's house and kids. Coyote Pass, the family's Arizona land, was supposed to be shared equally, but bank records, legal papers, and subtle manipulations revealed a different story altogether. Janelle didn't complain. She didn't create drama on television. But she watched, she filmed, and she prepared. Because behind every powerful woman is the moment she realizes she's had enough. And Janelle had arrived at hers. The punch came when Kody supposedly informed her that she had no real stake in the land, that spiritual marriages didn't grant her anything legally, and she'd never get a return on the money she had invested. It was a devastating blow, not only emotionally but financially. She trusted him. She contributed to that future. And now she was being wiped out of it. But rather than crumble, Janelle rose up. With the help of an attorney, she sued for everything. From stolen money to doctored contracts, she had documentation. Emails demonstrating property decisions made without her, texts in which Kody minimized her investment role, and recordings in which he flatly dismissed her rights. It wasn't so much a personal betrayal, it was an economic ambush, and Janelle was done. When the news of the court case was out, fans were shocked. But when the trial started, jaws hit the floor. Kody walked into the courtroom with his usual smugness, sure that this too would blow over like all other storms. He had Robin by his side, and attorneys on speed dial. But this wasn't TLC. This wasn't a family gathering where he could simply talk over everyone. This was court. And court is about facts. As the evidence piled up, Kody's defense began to unravel. The clincher? A tape played in court where Kody jeered at Janelle's fear and asserted dominion over everything. His own words turned against him. The courtroom hushed. The judge leaned forward, and suddenly it was no longer about tension. It was legal. It was real. It was serious. When finally the verdict was read, you could have heard a pin drop. $415,000 in damages. Kody remained still, his face white, his swagger lost. Janelle? She didn't scream. She didn't weep. She just smiled. A gentle, serene smile, the kind that happens when you know justice was served. And in that moment, she became a symbol. A symbol for every woman who stayed quiet too long. A symbol for every individual told their voice didn't matter. A symbol of fairness, of self-worth, and of taking back power from a man who never should have had it to begin with. The verdict was worth more than currency. It was a message. spiritual marriage is not equal to financial invincibility. And for Kody Brown, that message reverberated louder than anything he's ever uttered in a confessional booth. The aftermath? Janelle is moving on. Stronger than ever, she's building a wellness empire, reconnecting with her fans, and most importantly, living life on her terms, without guilt, without manipulation, without Kody. And Kody? He's nowhere to be found. Rumor has it he's racing to come up with the payoff. Others say he's losing more than just cash. He's losing respect, and in the public's court of opinion, that could cost him more than any amount of dollars ever possibly could. This courtroom battle wasn't just a headline. It was a turning point in the sister wives saga, and it may have permanently changed the future of reality TV's most controversial family. So if you've ever wondered whether the quiet one is actually the strongest, just look at Janelle Brown. She didn't scream, she didn't plot, she simply waited and struck with truth. And now, with $415K on the table and the world witnessing it, she's walking away from the theatrics, with her head held high, her rights reclaimed, and her legacy forever altered. Because sometimes the most potent revenge is justice. Want to hear the entire courtroom play-by-play, including bombshell revelations, and what's next for the Brown family? Hang in there as we break it down step by step in today's video. The courtroom was hushed, the kind of hush you sense rather than hear. Eyes were fixed, breaths caught, and even the air itself too frightened to stir. And then, it came. The verdict burst forth like thunder. $415,000 in damages awarded to Janelle Brown. For one fleeting moment, time stood still. Kody Brown, once the unbreakable patriarch of the Sister Wives dynasty, frozen. No smirk, no spin, only numbing silence. And across the room, Janelle, serene, collected, triumphant. But to grasp how astonishing this moment was, we must travel back to the start. To the moment when the cracks first emerged in the shiny facade of a polygamous family who were once lauded for modern love and unified togetherness. Because the reality is that this courtroom fight wasn't conceived overnight. It was conceived out of years of hidden stress, broken vows, and silent acts of deceit that finally burst into view. Janelle Brown had been along for nearly the entire ride. She was not Kody's initial wife, but perhaps the glue that held everything together, years before reality television shows began filming in town. Level-headed, thinking, and usually referred to as the most rational of Kody's wives, Janelle worked behind the scenes, doing her part. While others battled for attention or affection, Janelle worked on the larger picture, the finances, the children, and the future. But what she didn't know, at least not initially, was that her loyalty, her diligence, and her emotional self-control were being turned against her. Over the years, the emotional distance between Kody and Janelle grew. He invested more time in Robin, more money, more energy. Viewers of the show noticed. The other wives noticed. And eventually, Janelle noticed as well. But rather than lash out or vent her complaints publicly, she bit her tongue. She attempted to make it work. She assured herself it was a phase. That's the kind of thing spiritual marriages were all about, right? Sticking out the tough times, sacrificing for the family, holding on to the faith, and then the land. Oh, Coyote Pass. The dream home, the investment all the wives had been led to believe would one day welcome each of their families. Equal shares, equal rights, equal futures. Only that's not how it went. As years turned into months, nothing was constructed. No houses, no buildings, just forms, volumes and volumes of confusing forms, with Janelle frequently kept in the dark. Kody, on the other hand, made decisions without complete transparency. Papers were put away in some names, not others. Money was moved, loans were borrowed, and whenever Janelle asked questions, she was rewarded with vague responses, circular reasoning, or worse, gaslighting. You don't understand how this works, Janelle. You're just being paranoid. Trust me, it's all under control. But something in her intuition said it wasn't. And then, there was the tipping point. The moment that would turn everything around. According to leaked texts and insider reports, Janelle approached Kody privately one last time, asking for clarification on her stake in the land, her investment, and where things were heading. Kody allegedly told her point blank that she had no legal claim to the property, that it was under his name and Robin's, that spiritual marriages don't hold up in court, that she'd never see a dime from it. And that was it. Everything fell into place. All the years of not being in on things, all the evasive excuses, all the favoritism, the money secrecy, the gradual nudge towards isolation. It wasn't personal. It was intentional. But Janelle didn't scream. She didn't post a cryptic Instagram story. She didn't storm off set. She called a lawyer. And then came the silent preparation of a legal tempest, such as the Brown family had never encountered. In the following months, Janelle and her lawyers gathered what would prove to be one of the most incriminating financial cases to ever appear on reality TV. She had receipts, and not just figuratively. Paper trails, emails, text messages, and deeds to property. Documentation of every dime she spent. Documentation of every promise made and broken. When the suit was filed officially, it shook the fan base. Some doubted it. Some cheered. But nobody thought the court would take it this seriously, because spiritual marriages are not legally recognized, and polygamy, unofficial as it is hardly enforced or litigated. But this wasn't about religion. This wasn't about polygamy. This was about fraud, financial deception, and a woman finally standing up to the man who believed he could talk his way, manipulate his way, and outlast everyone. And the court concurred. The courtroom was filled, not with fans, but with lawyers, journalists, and family members too afraid to testify, but too inquisitive to avoid. Kody arrived, dressed to impress, hair gelled, suit pressed, confidence at maximum levels. Robin stood beside him, holding his hand, offering words of encouragement. But Janelle, she attended alone, strong, serene, undeterred. Over the course of the trial, Janelle presented her argument with precision, every penny accounted for, each investment supported by a promise broken. She outlined how she had invested equally, if not more, in the land purchase, how she was constantly assured she was included in the long-term plan, then left off legal papers. She even introduced a recording of Kody laughing about her attempting to bring him to court. That was the moment that turned. Even Kody's own attorneys looked shaken. The judge leaned forward. The jury scribbled notes, and piece by piece, the story that Kody had always scripted on TV, off TV, in every family discussion, started to come apart. When it was his time to testify, Kody's own charm failed him. He stuttered, he evaded, he attempted to charm the courtroom, but charm doesn't hold up to the evidence. By the last day, the tension in the courtroom had completely changed. Everyone knew where it was going. And then the bombshell dropped. $415,000. That's how much the court ordered Kody to pay Janelle, not only for the land, but for the emotional damages, the financial fraud, and the outright abuse of trust. The room came to a halt. Kody stood there, mouth slightly agape, eyes scanning. And Janelle, she nodded once only, a soft, modest nod, that she had struggled the good fight, and emerged victorious. And more than money, what she gained was something you can't assign a price. Freedom, closure, justice. And for all the fans across the globe, who saw her suffer for so long, it was a moment of raw, emotional triumph. A reminder that even the most reticent among us have a breaking point. And when they finally utter the words, the world hears. It wasn't merely a victory in the courtroom. It was a reckoning. And the Brown family would never be the same. She was the steadfast one, the quiet one, the wife always with head held high, even when her heart was breaking quietly. But when Janelle Brown understood the reality, that she wasn't merely being emotionally shrugged off, but financially misled, something within her snapped. And what emerged from the flames wasn't a wife pleading for respect. It was a warrior pleading for justice. For more than 2 decades, Janelle Brown held her place in the polygamous puzzle of the Brown family with dignity and decorum. She wasn't Kody's #1 wife, and she was hardly his favorite, but she was always the glue that kept things together when everyone else lost their. She was the one who balanced the books, wrote the checks, managed the mess, and swallowed her ego in order to have peace. Her children and the overall good of the family always came first when it came to her love for them. She always put her needs second. But here's the thing about doing that for so long. At some point, your silence turns into your prison. And for Janelle, the walls of that prison were constructed out of broken promises, each one placed there by Kody himself. Let's go back to how it all began to fall apart. When the Browns relocated to Flagstaff, Arizona, it all felt like a new beginning. The family had departed from Las Vegas, and they were full of optimism. Kody envisioned something big, shared property in an expansive estate called Coyote Pass. Each of the wives would have her own residence, and together they would create a new life. It was a dream. It was marketed as a collaborative effort, but in practice it turned into a power struggle. Janelle, being the practical one, immediately started scheming. She invested her savings in the land, started drawing up building schematics, and even sold the family's Las Vegas house to contribute her portion. She believed that what Kody had promised, fairness, togetherness, and long-term family investment, was true. But eventually things started changing. Kody became more emotionally invested in Robyn. His decisions about the land became less collaborative and more controlling. Legal documents were signed behind closed doors. Properties were put in Kody and Robyn's names. Meetings were skipped. Questions were dodged. And every time Janelle asked for clarity, she was given vague reassurances like, "Don't worry, it'll all work out. We're just figuring out the logistics. I have a plan, you just have to trust me." And for a time she did, until trust became suspicion, and suspicion became investigation. The last straw came on a taped episode of Sister Wives, when Janelle discovered that she did not legally own any of the land. After investing tens of thousands of dollars, she was not even named on critical documents. And when she confronted Kody for explanations, his answer was chilling, offhand, and belittling. He informed her, on television, that spiritual marriage was not of legal consequence, and that she had no right to anything. Not the property, not the home, not the funds. In that instant, Janelle realized things in perspective for the first time. She had given up everything for this man. She had followed him state to state. She had assisted in raising his children. She had supported him in every choice, despite it crushing her spirit. And now, he was lecturing her on how she was owed nothing. That wasn't betrayal. That was war. But Janelle didn't lose it. She didn't throw dishes. She didn't have a publicized shouting match on national television. She became intelligent. She became strategic. And she got legal representation. With the urging of her older kids, particularly Gabriel and Garrison, who had always known better than to believe Kody's favoritism, Janelle secretly sat down with a financial planner. What she learned made her ill to her stomach. More than $100,000 of her funds had been transferred to a joint family account, only to be used subsequently to pay for Robyn's house. Not her house, not a joint investment, but Robyn's own personal home, featuring spanking new furniture, security systems, and amenities. The property at Coyote Pass. Even though all of the wives contributed financially, only Robyn and Kody's names appeared on the original deed. Janelle's name was not on it anywhere. And the kicker was, emails from Kody to a real estate lawyer indicated that he intended to restructure the ownership altogether, essentially shutting out Janelle and Christine from having any legal right to the house. That was enough for Janelle to witness. She brought the suit, initially quietly, accusing Bud of financial fraud, contractual breach, coercion of family property, and emotional injury. She did not seek vengeance. She sought her rightful due, and more importantly, she sought to have the record reflect the truth. What ensued surprised even Janelle. As news of the suit reached the press, fans blew up on social media. Women all over the country rallied in support, many having found themselves in similar situations, emotionally and financially manipulated by men who believed they had complete control. Janelle emerged as a beacon of strength, autonomy, and responsibility. And the truth was, Kody was not prepared for this. He had misjudged her. All these years he thought of Janelle as the easy one, the wife who would never fight back, the one who would smile and keep peace no matter the price. But what he did not know was that Janelle was keeping score. She was keeping track of everything. And when the moment arrived, she stepped into that courtroom, not as a battered woman, but as a force of nature. Kody's first reaction: denial. He assured the media it was all a mistake, that family affairs don't belong in court. He even attempted to gaslight the public by saying Janelle was confused about the money system, and that he would never take advantage of her. But the papers didn't lie. Bank statements, deeds to property, private messages, it was all here, presented as evidence. Janelle's lawyers pored over every aspect of the Brown family finances, and exposed it for the world to see. And now, it wasn't all about Janelle anymore. It was about all the wives who had been marginalized. It was about the system that Kody had established, a system predicated on loyalty, but one in which only him and Robyn benefited. Even Christine, who had long since left Kody, issued a subdued message of support for Janelle, declaring, "No one deserves to be treated like that. I hope she gets everything she's owed." As the trial neared, tensions rose. Kody attempted to stall. He attempted to resolve quietly out of court. But Janelle did not relent. She didn't just want money. She wanted the world to know the truth. And when the courtroom doors swung open on that first day, she entered with head held high, clothed in confidence, not vengeance. Her testimony was steady, lucid, and brutally truthful. She testified about the emotional cost, the financial bewilderment, the perpetual dismissal. She brought documentation. She made her argument like a veteran lawyer. And when it was his turn to talk, Kody floundered. Gone was the scripted reality TV personality. In his place was a man who had finally figured out that he had pressed too hard, for too long, against the one woman he never imagined would push back. And push back she did. Janelle didn't only win the battle of the courtroom, she rewrote her legacy. She was no longer one of the wives. She was the one who rose up, the one who drew the line, the one who wouldn't let spiritual marriage be used as a means of legal exploitation. And, in doing that, she inspired hope in countless others who felt they were helpless. Because Janelle Brown is not quiet anymore. She is a voice, a movement, a woman reborn. For years, Kody Brown had people believing he was the boss, the provider, the leader, the man with the plan. But in that courtroom, under the glare of the blinding lights of the law, the reality show star couldn't spin his way out. The charm fled, the confidence shattered, and the truth exposed for all to see. When the lawsuit first became public, Kody Brown did what he always did. He attempted to control the narrative. To the media, he described it as a personal family misunderstanding. To the fans, he smeared Janelle as misinformed and emotional. He even suggested that this was Christine's doing, that the ex-wife who had already defected was now contaminating Janelle's loyalty. But what Kody had no idea was that this time, he wasn't working with family meetings and confessionals. He was working with a courtroom. And courtrooms don't operate on charm or manipulation. They operate on facts. Kody showed up at the courthouse with his legal team around him, sharply dressed, with Robin in tow. It was obvious they'd prepared the photops. The devoted husband, the guy who had nothing to hide, the aggrieved party. As the judge entered the bench, and the testimony started to roll out, though Kody's well-coiffed image started to fall apart quickly. Janelle's camp had prepared. They began their case with a brief declaration. This is not a question of faith. This is a question of fraud. They then set about sequentially untangling Kody's financial transactions, particularly the murkily entangled Coyote Pass property. Janelle's attorneys introduced bank records indicating that more than $100,000 of Janelle's funds had been contributed to a family account subsequently devoted entirely to Robin's home mortgage. Property records indicating that despite Janelle's contributions, her name never appeared on any official land deeds. Text messages and emails where Kody reassured Janelle that she would own her share of the property, only to contradict that in legal filings. A recorded conversation, yes, recorded, where Kody told Janelle, quote, "You're not legally entitled to anything. It's all in my name for a reason." That last piece hit like a grenade. The courtroom went silent. Even Kody's own lawyer appeared shaken. And that's when the judge began leaning forward, not to hear, but to inquire. Because this wasn't simply a disastrous divorce or a theological dispute. This was starting to resemble willful misrepresentation. Kody was summoned to testify. That suave, camera-ready dad from TLC was nowhere to be found. The man who stood before the court appeared, vulnerable, jittery, defensive. He attempted to spin. He said the money was for the family, that they made choices in everybody's best interests. He argued that spiritual agreements controlled their decisions, not legalities. But the judge wouldn't buy it. He asked bluntly, "If you didn't have a legal marriage to Janelle, why did you let her invest thousands in property she had no legal right to?" Kody hesitated. He mumbled something about trust and future plans. But it was too late. The mood in the room had changed. His plan was crumbling. And it did not help that, during his testimony, Robin remained stone-faced, whispering occasionally to their lawyer, but never once making eye contact with Janelle. If ever there were an opportunity to demonstrate unity or empathy, it was lost. Janelle, on the other hand, stood calm. Her words were concise, her responses to the point. She wasn't there for retribution, she was there for justice. On cross-examination, she said, "I felt like we were a team. I believed my efforts would be respected. But Kody manipulated my loyalty and trust. That's not love, that's manipulation." Her words rang out in the courtroom, and the public. They were watching. Social media erupted with hashtags. #Justice for Janelle, #Coyote Past Truth, #Kody. Exposed former viewers of the show, who had been sympathetic to Kody's father of many story, started turning against him. Footage from the courtroom started making the rounds on the internet. Memes, TikToks, commentary videos, and perhaps most hurtful of all, other former members of the Brown family started talking. Christine issued a statement on Instagram. "Janelle is brave. What she's doing takes courage. I support her 100%. Even Mary, who had been relatively quiet, posted an enigmatic message. The truth always finds its way out. The tide was turning quickly. Kody's lawyers attempted one final strategy: minimize and settle. They offered Janelle a portion of what she was asking for in return for dismissing the case in a private negotiation. But she rejected it. Because for Janelle, this wasn't about money, it was about integrity. About making a stand for every woman who had ever been taken off the track in a relationship under the pretext of spiritual obligation. About finally calling someone to account for hiding greed behind the wall of faith. And then came the coup de grace. Janelle's lawyers uncovered a paper trail of Kody trying to transfer assets to Robyn's name alone. Just a few weeks after Janelle requested her portion of the land be clarified. It was calculated. It was underhanded. And it was enough to paint a clear picture. This wasn't bad planning. This wasn't spiritual muddling. This was a man hiding behind religion to control money, power, and people. The judge recessed court for deliberation. Kody attempted to keep his cool. Robyn stared down at her lap. Janelle sat quietly, ringed by her team, her face inscrutable but her presence palpable. When court resumed, the verdict was handed down quickly. Kody Brown was instructed to pay Janelle $415,000. Her land investment, her share of misdirected funds, emotional damages, and court costs. The courtroom was silent. Kody appeared stunned. No dramatic reaction. No speech, only silence. Janelle, she took a breath, and smiled. It wasn't a self-satisfied smile, it was a healing one. Because she knew what it symbolized. She had won, not just in court, but in life. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, and reporters crowded. But Janelle gave just one brief quote. "This wasn't about hurting someone, it was about healing me. And I hope other women who are watching understand that they have every right to stand up for themselves, no matter who attempts to silence them." And with that, she walked out. Strong, unfazed, liberated. Kody, on the other hand, slipped out a side door to evade cameras. And in the ensuing days, sources said he had withdrawn from public view completely, shunning interviews, scrubbing appearances, and reportedly wrestling to conjure the entire court-ordered payment. His empire, rocked. His reputation, tarnished. His legacy, shaken. And it all boiled down to one woman's bravery to declare, "Enough." $415,000. $415,000. The minute that figure echoed in the courtroom, everything shifted. Kody Brown, the self-appointed patriarch of a family founded on faith and unity, was no longer the man in charge. That figure wasn't merely a monetary verdict. It was a reckoning. A message that no amount of spiritual rhetoric, manipulation, or charisma could trump truth, justice, and responsibility. The ruling shocked not only the courtroom, but families throughout America. Sister wives, fanatics, critics, and media alike all responded with a collective gasp. She actually did it. Let's dissect it. Because this wasn't simply a regular court victory. This was a moment of change. For Janelle, for the Brown family legacy, and for how spiritual marriages and financial abuse are perceived in society. What the verdict implicated legal impact first. Please. The judge's decision was backed up by crystal clarity. Kody Brown was guilty of financial dishonesty, misuse of jointly held property, and neglecting to honor verbal and written arrangements entered into with Janelle Brown. Regardless of the religious nature of their union, the court recognized that money arrangements, investments, and property contribution crossed spiritual lines. Janelle did not have a legal marriage certificate, but she had receipts, proof of intention, and a paper trail of trust that was clearly breached. The court granted her $250,000 for her financial investment in the Coyote Pass real estate, $75,000 for the diverted funds that were channeled toward Robin's residence, $50,000 in emotional damages for stress and mental distress from the years of deception, $40,000 to pay legal fees and costs of court. Together, $415,000, a symbolic and financial blow to a man who had considered himself invincible. But aside from the cash, this ruling made history. To the court, spiritual wives economically bound in a family unit are not without rights. And in this instance, those rights thundered louder than any spiritual promise. Kody's reaction. A legacy in ruins. Kody Brown didn't grant interviews that day. He didn't make a statement. But his expression in that courtroom spoke volumes. Shock, disbelief, and maybe for the first time fear. For this decision didn't merely carve out a chunk of his money, it broke the very foundation he established his public persona on. Kody had always portrayed himself as the wise, just, and benevolent head of a plural family. But when confronted with hard proof and a court of law, the story unraveled. His favoritism toward Robin, his mishandling of family finances, and his chronic gaslighting of the other wives, particularly Janelle, were now official. Within a matter of hours, the man who spent decades controlling the narrative lost everything: his financial security, his moral integrity, and potentially his future on television nationwide. Reports started spreading that TLC executives were re-evaluating the format of future seasons. With Kody's reputation in shambles, fans called for the focus to shift away from him and toward the women who were finally speaking out. Janelle's response, calm, poised, and powerful outside the courthouse. There were dozens of reporters waiting. Fans showed up, carrying signs such as Team Janelle, spiritual doesn't mean powerless, and tell your truth. When Janelle stepped out of the van, surrounded by her attorney and two of her children, she didn't smirk. She didn't weep. She just moved up to the microphones and stated, "This is not about hurting anyone. It's about protecting myself. For far too long I took less than I deserved, emotionally and financially. Today I spoke up. And I hope every woman watching this understands that you don't have to remain silent. You don't have to remain stuck. You can rise." Her statements were posted on social media within minutes. #Justice for Janelle was trending nationally. Women's rights groups praised her as a brave woman. Even detractors who'd written her off as passive now celebrated her as a symbol of strength. Janelle didn't only win a lawsuit, she won the public's support. And the victory wasn't symbolic. Within days of the verdict, Janelle launched a new wellness coaching brand, dedicated to empowering women. She was contacted for interviews on Oprah, Dr. Phil, and several news stations. She picked up more than 300,000 new Instagram followers, all of whom were cheering her on in her transformation. But most empowering of all did she receive: control of her own story. For years she'd been cut, edited, and molded into a supporting character in Sister Wives. But now she was in the spotlight, and wholly in control. Robin's silence and the fallout at home. As Janelle flew high, Robin Brown was ominously quiet. No comments, no tweets, no interviews, and that silence screamed loudly. Whispers started flowing that tensions behind the scenes were escalating. Sources close to the family asserted that Kody was enraged, not only with the verdict, but also with the way Robin's inclusion in the financial decisions was now open to scrutiny. For years the fans had accused Robin of being the favored wife, the one who got the most out of Kody's time, attention, and now it appeared: his bank account. And now, those accusations had bite. The court disclosed that more than $75,000 of Janelle's investment was transferred into Robin's house, with no documented record of reimbursement or agreement. That house, which had been the backdrop of Kody's new chapter, was now a testament to everything that failed. Robin's reputation suffered. Hands who once felt sorry for her were now calling her complicit. Was she merely a wife in the middle, Or was she in on a plot that left the other wives emotionally and financially drained? Only time would know. But public opinion was already shifting. What happens next? Financial struggles and reality TV rumors. At $415,000 in debt, many wondered, can Kody even afford this? Several sources asserted that his earnings from sister wives had fallen in recent years, and that legal fees and back taxes were already mounting. Some predicted he'd have to sell assets or go on loans to come up with the payment. Others worried another suit, by Christine or even Mary, could be on the horizon. Actually, some sources suggested that Mary had hired lawyers to discuss her monetary inputs in the initial years of the joint business ventures of the Brown family. If additional suits follow, Kody may be facing total financial ruin. TLC's next action? Still unknown. However, insiders reveal the producers are looking into a Janelle-focused spin-off, her journey toward getting better, her budding business, and how she interacts with her children independent of Kody's influence. The concept of a Brown Women Reclaim Their Power series is taking off with Janelle and Christine at the helm. After all, their narratives now hold the essence of the Sister Wives fanbase. And Kody? Viewers are less concerned about the man who previously proclaimed to be the glue that held it all together, particularly now that said glue has dissolved. The bigger message, more than just reality TV. This ruling grew larger than Sister Wives. It generated national discussions regarding financial exploitation in alternative relationships, the legal loopholes of spiritual marriages, the significance of record-keeping and financial savvy for women. Janelle's case is now being taught in law schools. Women's groups are using it as an example of how financial and emotional manipulation tend to go together, and how the justice system can in some instances offer redress even when there isn't a marriage certificate. She didn't remake herself, she remade the dialogue. By the time the courthouse cleared that afternoon, everything was different. Kody Brown was no longer the patriarch in charge, Robyn was no longer the insulated favorite, and Janelle Brown was no longer the shy wife in the background. She was the woman who stood up, the woman who fought back, the woman who won. $415,000. $415,000. The instant that amount was sounded out in the courtroom, it all shifted. Kody Brown, the self-titled patriarch of a family founded on faith and unity, was no longer the man in charge. That figure wasn't merely a monetary verdict. It was a reckoning, a pronouncement that nothing in spiritual babble, manipulation, or charisma could trump truth, justice, and responsibility. The ruling caused shockwaves not only through the court, but through living rooms across America. Sister Wives fans, pundits, and the media all responded with a collective gasp. She really did it. Let's unpack. It wasn't just a typical court victory. It was a turning point. For Janelle, for the Brown family legacy, and for how spiritual marriages and financial abuse are perceived in the public eye. What the verdict was legally first. Some legal fallout. The judge's decision was clear as day. Kody Brown was guilty of financial fraud, theft of jointly held property, and failure to abide by word and written agreements with Janelle Brown. Even with the spiritual intentions behind their union, the court recognized that financial arrangements, investment, and property contributions have nothing to do with spirituality. Janelle didn't necessarily have a legal certificate of marriage, but she had receipts, documentation of intent, and a paper trail of trust that was so obviously breached. The court granted her $250,000 for her financial investment in the Coyote Pass property, $75,000 for diverted money that was redirected toward Robyn's property, $50,000 in emotional damages for stress and mental distress caused by the long deception, $40,000 to pay for legal expenses and court costs. A total of $415,000. A symbolic and physical blow to a man who once considered himself invincible. But aside from the cash, this ruling established precedents. To the court, spiritual wives financially enmeshed in a family dynamic are not bereft of rights. And in this instance, those rights trumped any spiritual promise. Kody's reaction. A legacy in tatters. Kody Brown said nothing to the media that day. He offered no formal statement. But that expression in that courtroom spoke volumes. Shock, disbelief, and maybe for the first time fear. Because this decision didn't simply take a bite out of his money, it broke the very foundation he established his public persona on. Kody portrayed himself always as the benevolent, wise, and kind head of a plural family, but stand before hard evidence and a court of law, and the story unraveled. His partiality toward Robyn, his poor management of family assets, and his consistent gaslighting of the other wives, particularly Janelle, were now on record. Within hours, the man who spent decades dictating the narrative lost everything: his economic security, his moral integrity, and potentially his national TV future. Rumors started flowing that TLC producers were reconsidering the format of future seasons. With Kody's reputation in shambles, viewers called for the spotlight to shift away from him and onto the women who were finally taking back control. Janelle's reaction, calm, composed, and empowering outside the courtroom. Several dozen reporters lined up. Fans arrived, brandishing signs such as Team Janelle, "Spiritual doesn't mean powerless," and "Tell your truth." When Janelle appeared, surrounded by her attorneys and two of her children, she didn't celebrate. She didn't sob. She merely approached the microphones and stated, "This isn't about hurting anybody. It's about protecting myself. For far too long, I tolerated less than I deserved, emotionally and financially. Today I stood up, and I hope every woman who's watching this today knows that you don't have to remain quiet. You don't have to remain stuck. You can rise." Her statement went viral on social media in minutes. #Justice for Janelle trended. Nationally, women's organizations praised her bravery. Even detractors who had previously written her off as passive now welcomed her as a beacon of strength. Janelle did not merely secure a court victory, she secured the public's affection, and the victory was not mere symbolism. Days after the verdict, Janelle launched a new wellness coaching brand, dedicated to empowering women. She was interviewed by Oprah, Dr. Phil, and several news channels. She picked up more than 300,000 new Instagram followers, all cheering for her transformation. But the most empowering thing she acquired: the power to control her own story. For years, she had been edited, cut, and molded into a supporting character in Sister Wives. But now she was the center of attention, and completely in control. Robyn's silence and the fallout at home. Whereas Janelle was flying high, Kody Brown was strangely quiet. No words, no posts, no interviews. And that deafening silence was telling. Rumors started doing the rounds that the tensions were simmering backstage. Sources close to the family stated Kody was furious, not only with the verdict, but also with how Robyn's involvement in the financial matters was now public knowledge. For years, the fans assumed Robyn was the favorite wife, the one who got the most out of Kody's time, attention, and now apparently his finances. And now those fans' suspicions had teeth. The court disclosed that more than $75,000 of Janelle's investment went into Robyn's house, with no documented record of reimbursement or permission. That house, which was once a symbol of Kody's new chapter, was now a symbol of all that failed. Robyn's reputation suffered. Sympathetic viewers who once rooted for her were now calling her complicit. Was she a wife torn in the middle, or a part of a conspiracy that left the other wives emotionally and financially drained? Only time would tell. Public opinion was already shifting, however. What comes next? Financial struggles and reality TV rumors. With $415,000 to pay back, many wondered, is Kody even able to afford this? Several sources reported that his earnings from Sister Wives had declined in recent years, and that legal fees and unpaid taxes already had him building up a tab. Some predicted he'd have to sell real estate or secure loans to cover the payment. Others dreaded that a new suit by Christine or even Mary could be on the horizon. In reality, a number of outlets suggested that Mary had spoken to lawyers about her financial investment in the early days of the Brown family's shared enterprises. If subsequent lawsuits ensue, Kody might find himself facing total financial ruin. What's next for TLC? Still unknown. But according to sources, the producers are also looking into a Janelle-focused spin-off, centering on her recovery, her new venture, and her lives with her children beyond Kody's influence. The concept of a Brown Women Reclaim Their Power series is picking up steam, with Janelle and Christine at the core. After all, their narratives now have the essence of the Sister Wives fan base. And Kody? Well, folks don't care as much about the guy who used to call himself the glue that kept it all together, particularly now that said glue has melted. The bigger message, more than just reality TV. This decision became larger than Sister Wives. It initiated national discussions regarding financial abuse in non-traditional marriages, the legal gray areas of spiritual marriages, the significance of documentation and financial knowledge among women. Janelle's situation is now the subject of law school classes. Women's groups are quoting it as a landmark case of how money and emotional manipulation tend to go together, and how the law can occasionally give redress even in the absence of a marriage certificate. She didn't simply alter her existence. She altered the discourse. When the courthouse cleared that afternoon, everything had changed. Kody Brown was no longer the patriarch in charge. Robin was not longer the favored but protected one. And Janelle Brown was not longer the reserved wife in the shadows. She was the woman who stood up, the woman who fought back, the woman who won.